My name is Jimmy Douglas. I am presently a mixing engineer producer. I'm presently residing in Florida. My career has taken me through many places. I originally was born in Philadelphia, and I ended up in New York, and my basic career started in New York and kind of blossomed in New York, and here I sit. I grew up in two different places, actually. I grew up in Philadelphia till the ripe age of 11. And then I moved to Kings Point, Great Neck, Long Island. It's kind of like the Fresh Prince story. It's a very, very rich town. So I came from the poverty of Philadelphia and grew up over there. It was amazing because, I grew up in basically depraved city, Philadelphia, and all black community. I could probably count the amount of white folks that I saw that even came in our community growing up. And that was very hard. It was serious. It was serious living. It was life-threatening living. You had to find a way to survive every day, and not even a joke. And I remember very clearly all my friends, when they went to junior high before me, they would tell me stories about how they would get beat up, robbed, the whole thing. And I was like, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it. And somehow God just grabbed me and said, no, you're gonna have this now. And I went to like totally, over affluent. It would be like the Beverly Hills of the East, and where people had everything. And it was 98% white. It was Jewish, but to me, white, Jewish, it wasn't black. That's all I knew. And it was a different way of living, and and everything was available. And it was a different part of life. And so, I guess basically my musical connection there would be like, growing up in the hood, the gospel church was how I grew. And I'd go to church every Sunday and even on nights and stuff. That's kind of how my mother kind of took care of me, but passed me around the church to keep, just to take care of me. So there you have all that good music and all that good feeling and all that soul and all that heart and all that stuff that you get from growing up that way. I was in the choir, I was, doing the things. Didn't play any instruments because didn't have any instruments actually, but I would have. And there was that growth, and there was also those values as a human being, that taught you a lot of things about having, not having. So when I switched over, the music I was hearing daily because of their radios was like totally different. It was, in the hood, you'd hear the James Browns, you'd hear the, all the regular R&B shit that was real. I mean, that's what we listened to. That's what we got to hear. And it was real, and it was great. And that's a reference going forward. Ray Charles, all that stuff, stuff my mom would listen to and, the grandparents listened to, was all that just really, really good stuff. Not to say the music isn't good, but I meant this is like the heart of America to me. When you really break it down, it's the heart of the British invasion. It's the heart of all that stuff. And so when I got to move over, I got to hear the other radio stations, and I got to hear all this other pop stuff. But I'm a little kid, and you're very influenced by what you hear. And the neighbors, my friends. I grew up with a family of four kids, and I lived actually with them, and I lived very, very nicely and very well. And they are family to me. They included me. They didn't do the Cinderella thing. Like, you're not a part of us, stay away. It was like, oh, you're brother. And that was a great feeling and a great thing. But I'm mentioning that just to mention that that's when the British Revolution came, and I became a part of it. Many times I hear people talk about, younger people that weren't really there, and they talk about the Beatles and all the Stone, all this other stuff, and I listen to them and I go, you're talking about it, but you're talking about it. You don't understand. It's the same thing. It's like when Drake put out a record and it affected your life. Well, that's what happened to me when the Beatles did that. So it's not like just going back and go, oh, I understand them. You don't understand. It was a lifestyle. And so, and I'm saying there's different lifestyles now. When Biggie came around, that was a lifestyle for a certain generation, Pac. So that's how I relate to what I knew, and that became ingrained in me. I didn't know I would be making music for a living ever until I was doing it. Music was just something that was there. It was something I could do. One of the things that I was able to do with the family I lived with, they all took piano lessons, so they got me piano lessons. The guy would come and just go through all of us. And mom took some too, so he was like he had six clients there. And I was killing them. We always laugh about that to this day. They're like, I don't understand. We were playing the same stuff and you just went, meow. And I was like, well, hey, and I was his prize, I was one of his prize little students, That was fun. They had two pianos in the house, which was great. Two grand pianos, come on, what are we talking here? Um, and the one in the kitchen, the grand piano, nobody played it but me. I was just playing, later on I began to rock out. Because I was a kid that could play stuff, but I couldn't afford stuff. And all the kids around me could afford stuff, but they really couldn't play very well. They just had a lot of money and their parents could buy them what they wanted. And many of them thought that they'd be, stars or whatever, but it didn't matter. It was just a thing. So I would be always the kid in the back looking, going, oh man, if I had that Farfisa, but I didn't have the Farfisa, but I would join these bands and they go, oh, play the Farfisa because we like how you sing. And I would do these recitals and everybody would love me and I would love them and that was great. And I still have little pictures of me, little skinny me standing there with my little suit on after the recitals. And the teacher was very proud of me. And, my mom was proud, of course, as well. And then one summer, I would go away to summer camp, which, by the way, I paid for myself. With my newspaper route, I would just save the money and I have enough money at the end. My mom couldn't really afford to send me. But meanwhile, they were sending their kids to these crazy sleepaway camps that costed so much money. And I found one that was like middle, but it was good enough. So I went away and one summer I decided, if I had enough money, I decided to buy a guitar, which I didn't know how to play, but I just figured I'd buy it. And I bought the guitar and I started picking up some of those Beatles books that had the songs written and they had the little chord chart on top and and I just started learning how to, I would do things like Michael rode your boat ashore, hallelujah, etc. So I became that guy in the camp that had the guitar that could play, and everybody would, gather around. Look, Jimmy has the guitar. And then I realized, on my return home that summer, I realized the Bing Cherry moment. I sat at the piano. I was like, wait a minute. Not only is it like I was like, what about whoa? I said, whoa, oh my God, they're the same things. Oh my God. Oh, wow. So why can't I play these on here instead of the guitar? And that's when I kind of decided that's what I wanted to do. And I kind of taught myself that way. Yeah, piano teacher was not thrilled at all. He was actually very hurt. He saw things for me that, I was too young to really be ready to be involved with. And I'm not going to say that many times in my life I look back and I go, you might have had a whole different path if you've gone that particular route. I know I'd be really good at it because it's just, it's anything you kind of put your mind to, one can accomplish that, That whole transition happened quite by accident. I had this friend who knew this girl that decided that she just had to know me. Because I played little bands around town and stuff. None of these bands ever went anywhere, but I was that guy, I don't know. And I really had no focus about anything. I was even thinking about whether I'd even go to college or not. Because, I can mention one thing. I spent my whole time in school working in architecture. And I wanted to be an architect really badly. And I was really good at what I was doing. One of the assignments, I think, in the 11th grade was you had to do the whole house and the whole thing, and you had to actually build it. And understand, this is not now when you can go to the store and all the parts are made for you. You had to get the balsa wood, you had to get the port or whatever board that is, and you had to cut the shit up and measure it and you had to make it. They didn't have Gorilla Glue then. So I won for my house, for my design, for the actual making of the house. And it was great. And I actually, just to have you understand how unserious I was, I tried to get a couple jobs with a couple of architects for the summer. because all the people where I lived, they were bosses. They owned things, and nobody gave me a job, and it really, and nobody supported me that way, and it really screwed my head up, because that's really what I wanted to do. And I was like, you guys can do this. Why can't I? Why? This is how it works. And so what I did, what I did was I put a couple cherry bombs in it. Then when I won the house, and I just let it, and I blew it up, and I thought that was funny. And I look back and I go, you're supposed to wait till we had the iPhone so you could film it, idiot. Put it on YouTube. So at that moment, I was like, okay. And the other thing was my math was terrible in school. I could do a lot of other things. I could art and all that stuff. I was like the man. When it came to like math and science and the real stuff, I was terrible. So I was never going to get into one of those schools that you needed to go to get that degree. So I was like, okay, if it's going to be like that, Jimmy will be a drifter. But between the lady that I grew up with, I call her my surrogate mom. Between her, who was like, she wasn't having that. You're going to school, kid. You're not going to do this and not go to college. She's just not happening. And then I met this girl, a friend of mine who said, this girl, she just needed to know me. And when I met her finally, I was like, she was a good-looking girl, everything, but my mind just wasn't there. And I got to tell you what really, really got me about her. This is key. I went to her house once and I was sitting there and I was playing the piano and doing the singing, and she just walked up to me. She went, wow, that's interesting. Why don't you repeat that line? Why don't you play this chord like that? And I thought, whoa, what? Huh? How do you know this stuff? And then that's where the love affair came. It came through that medium. And I was like, wow, you know stuff. And she was a very, very smart woman. I mean, girl at the time, but very, very smart. And had a lot of knowledge of music and a lot of whatever. And it turns out, after many nights of being there, just being, I guess, not really present when we were all there, we're just always partying. And after many nights of even meeting her father once and sitting in the basement for, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, one night, it finally sunk in, and I looked and I went, why does your dad have all these gold records up there? She goes, because he owns Atlantic Records. And I'm like, wow, that's nice. Okay, cool. End of conversation. I wasn't the guy to go, I was just like, okay, that's really interesting, because he was a very intense dude, and that superseded him owning anything. I was like, he was a very scary dude. But once again, very smart dude and very wonderful. But that was the beginning of that. And then her mother took a very nice liking to me. And once again, in the Great Neck community, it's like, what do you mean you're not going to school? Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? It doesn't exist in our life, in our existence. So she was like trying to help me get a job at Atlantic just to have money for school. That was the connect. That was it. That was what we were all doing. It wasn't like I knew. I listened to a lot of people's stories, a lot of producers, engineers, and they go, "Wow, I was listening to the Beach Boys stuff, and I was like, I gotta know how they made those records." And it's like, nah, it wasn't any of that for me. It was like a job for school, and I walked into a situation that was like I didn't even have any idea about any of it. The way that I started learning about how it worked was amazing. And I've told these stories before. I will tell them again because they're true. The great thing about the truth is it doesn't change. One of the things that I used to do at home was I would play my guitar, and I had a little tape recorder. It was a little portable guy, and I'd record stuff. And then they had a Wallensack, which was bigger. And then one day I took their I just took the Wallensack, and I had it there, and I was like, wow, you mean you can play your guitar, and now you can record it over to the Wallensack, and now you can put some percussion. You can just play your lap. And I was doing that. I was going, wow, look at that. And then I would bounce it back again, and I would put some vocals on. And I was like, this is really cool. But I was going tape to tape to tape to tape. And it sounded like crap, probably. I don't have any of those moments to remember. But that was pretty much what recording was to me. And that was it. That was, once again, end of thought. And this job that they offered me, they started with the summer job, was really interesting because there was to be a part of, I guess, Atlantic, but the girl's name was Anita. Anita Wexler is her name. And Anita took me to a session for the first time. And in this session, it was very interesting because it was Atlantic Records, there's a big office, 2 floors. This is Atlantic Records, ain't no more. This is it, Atlantic Records. And then in the back was studios, like 2 studios they had. A studio and a mix room and 2 master rooms, that was it. And they were stuck together. There was a door, and you went through the door, there you were in the office of Atlantic Records. You go through the door, here you are in the studio. Simple little thing going on. And remember, I'm 16 years old, so I don't know what the hell's going on anyway. And so the session she took me to, for the first time in my life, to be in a recording studio, we walk in the back door, because they had the front door for Atlantic Records and then the back door for the studio, if you want. So we walked into this session, and we walked in this hallway, and I'm totally just excited because it's all new. And in the hallway, out of a garbage can, this guy jumps out of the freaking garbage can with was red hair, and he was just like, and he goes, jumps up, and I'm like, okay, this is already interesting. And he goes, oh, sorry. He says, put that back on me. He says, I thought you were somebody else. It was Ginger Baker from The Cream. And which I was actually half into The Cream, but I wasn't really into them yet, because they had the Fresh Cream record, which was But anyway, we go upstairs, and then there's Eric, and there's Jack Bruce, and then and they're cutting Disraeli gears. And this is the first time I've ever walked in a studio in my freaking life. And I'm just watching this whole thing going, what the fuck is this? And so we did that, and we left. And I don't even remember what record they were cutting. How's that sound? It was just, the experience was bigger than the actual information. Then I got this job that her mother was able to get me, which was basically, they gave me a job with the record distributor. And the record distributor was interesting because what happened, record distribution, because it was a warehouse where all the records that they had at Atlantic, they would press up the vinyl, and they would be sitting there, and your job was to walk around with a shopping cart and take orders from all the record stores. That's how it worked. They would put an order into the thing, and then the distributor would go, and I would go around, and I'd pick up, here's Buffalo Springfield. Oh, that's interesting. I've done a lot of them. I don't even know their record, but I've done a lot of them. Every time I go to a cart, I'm sending these out to somebody in the country. I'm like, whoa, I got to hear this. I need to hear this record. And that's what I was doing. I was doing that for that whole summer, and I was learning in my own way to really understand, not by charts, but by simply picking records off the shelf, what's hot and what's not. It wasn't about publicity. It wasn't about promotion. It was like, this is the real stuff. Every day I keep putting 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 of these a day, every day. So that's hot. So it was an experience in that whole thing. I kind of stopped doing it because they started sweating me because I would be late. And I'm like, look, come on, give a kid a break here, y'all. And they were like, no, you come on time. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Very, very shallow vision, but that's how I did it. And so I kind of left. And then, Shirley was like, oh, Jerry, that job that you gave him over there, it's not really for da-da-da-da. So they gave me another job, actually at the record company. And this job was more interesting. It was called tape copying. And once again, I've told these stories before, but it kind of describes how the industry worked and things that are no longer necessary. But this particular job was interesting because what you would do is let's just take an example. Let's take an Aretha record. This is how it would work. Atlantic Records would make the Aretha record, then they'd make it on tape, and then they would have to put it on vinyl, because that's how people were listening to records then, on vinyl. So you go to in the mastering room, that's what the original mastering was all about, to get it to vinyl. And the problems that you had with vinyl were interesting. Too much bottom, it would jump out of the grooves. So you had to find ways to compress it, to control it. That's what original mastering, the term, came from, to make the record not skip. And also, if you had an album, the levels on the different mixes would be so different and drastic, you have to make them all even so it feels like one experience. That's the original mastering. That's how I understand mastering. As opposed to, listen to this mix. It's not mastered yet. Okay. It's still got to sound like it's supposed to sound. So in this process, what would happen is, and if you'll just, with me, enjoy this little journey. So you had a big, massive hit record, and then let's say a A big massive hit record has to be distributed around the world. So what do? Do you like make up a whole bunch of these heavy, heavy little records and put them on a boat or an airplane and send them over to France, send them over to Italy, send them over to wherever the hell, they got to go? No. What do? Here was the trick. When you did the mastering, you would do the EQ and the levels, and then they'd have another tape running on the side that would basically you'd record that to there as you recorded it onto the vinyl. And then this particular tape now has all the secrets that the mastering engineer put into it. All the EQ, all the levels, so you didn't need to know anything. So my job was to get this particular tape and make a copy of it and send it to Germany, Italy, France, England, count them. There was about 7 or 8 countries, Japan. And so every record that Atlantic put out, they had to make one of those of every one of their records. So my job was to basically stand there all day and copy tapes of some really fine music. So that's that part. That's the part of the story. And it was a good job for a kid in school because I could do my homework while I let it play. And then I could, you let it play, let it copy, and then you do your homework. And then when it's over, you put the next tape up and you do this and do this and do this. There was one flaw in that particular situation. So my office or my little room was down right on the side, on the downstairs part of the record company, in a little hallway there. And if you made a turn and go that way through that door, and I worked at night, by the way, so I came in after school, and I worked at night when all the office people went home, and only the cool people were left in the back in the studio. And I walked through the door in between my thing when I should be doing the homework, and I walk in, and what do you got? You got like Aretha and some musicians, and they're playing stuff. And I'm just sitting there going, this is fucking cool. This is cool. And I'm going, well, it's time to go back and change the tape. Run back, change the tape, boom, back over here. That's all I started doing. And didn't get much homework done. And that's when I got to watch Tommy Dowd and got to watch that whole process. And that's kind of how I walked into it. A lucky guy, huh? I'm a lucky guy. Tommy Dowd was an interesting human being. And I will try to backtrack this because he was just, what was interesting about Tommy was he assumed that you knew what he knew, and he gave you credit for knowing first. It's, most of the time it's the opposite. You don't know nothing, get away. He was the opposite. Whatever, eat all you can eat. How much can you eat? And the more you could eat, he was happy to have it. So my relationship with Tommy Dowd was very interesting. I'd watch him do all this stuff. He was he was the main house engineer. They had some other engineers, Adrian Barber, and they did that whole era when they were, the Aretha, Cream, Allman Brothers, you name it. And he would basically be the man that everybody relied on because he was a musician at one point. And he also had the ability to understand how to, when I say the word produce, how to basically direct a session. And then you had Jerry Wexler and Ahmed Erdogan, who would actually rely on Tommy because they're busy running a record company and they run back and forth. What do you think, Tommy? What did we got? No, I'll tell you my story about Tommy that I didn't know. This is called, I learned this later in life. There was, after Jerry Wexler left in the middle 70s or whatever, there was a guy named Jerry Greenberg who became the president of Atlantic Records. And he was really tight with me because I knew him as Jerry's assistant. I knew him as a little peon. He used to get yelled at and everything. And suddenly he's the president. So, we had a nice relationship. And I think on their 30th anniversary or whatever, we were at this party and Jerry was telling stories about how great it was back in the day. And he goes, you remember, Jimmy? He says, you remember? And I'm like going, okay, I remember. And people are looking like, yeah, what? And he goes, it was so crazy. He says, you'd walk down the hall, he says, and you'd see Tommy Dowd putting a guy whistling on an Otis record. And I went, what do you mean? That wasn't Otis on Dock of the Bay? I'm like, my whole life I thought it was Otis whistling. Matter of fact, to me, part of that record, Otis Redding had died right before that record came out. And when you heard him whistling on that record, it made you just cry because you thought of Otis crying on the Dock of the Bay. I wasn't there when they made those records, but I just, as a listener or participant, I was like, when he said that, I just went, That's the kind of shit Tommy did. We need a whistler, so Otis ain't here, so you put it on whistling. Public doesn't know. It makes it, so that's the kind of guy Tommy would do. He would do stuff like that. He would do stuff that just made sense to making records finish right. So I was able to work with Tommy Dowd in a way that was very interesting. Now, remember I was telling you the story about the tape duplications? So one of the first records I ever saw mixed was a record called Dusty in Memphis. And the hit record off of that was Breakfast in Bed, Son of a Preacher Man. And a couple things happened. I saw them doing the overdubs, and I was just told it was amazing. And in that overdub, I saw the overdubs, the background vocals, and I saw Dusty doing some vocals. But in the background vocals, there was a woman named Cissy Houston. And Cissy Houston is Whitney's mother. And they were there doing, "Who's the son of a preacher man?" And that sound, they were called the group called the Sweet Inspirations. And so I got to see that part of it, and that was mind-blowing in between going back and doing the tapes. And then Tommy was left to mix the whole record. And I would go back there all the time, because like, remember, I said at night, nobody was around. And I would just sit in the back of the room and watch him. I didn't know what the hell he was doing. I didn't. I was just watching him, and I watched, and he never said, "I'm doing this." He would sit there and talk to the freaking tape machine in the console. That's what he would do. And he would just mix the stuff, and he'd laugh at the stuff. The bass would pop and it shouldn't. He goes, "Aha, you got me this time." Aha. And I'd watch this guy, and I'd watch him he'd go to this thing. I guess I didn't know it was called a patch bay, but he'd go to this thing and he'd be doing stuff. And I was like, oh. So what I started doing because of that relationship, because he said to me, if you want to do some of this, we have some demo tapes in the library. You can play with them if you want. And they had they had 8-track demos. That's what it was. That was the era. That it was, it came in like just the end of the old, and we were about to get more tracks and stuff. But I go into the library, and I come in the morning, and I go in there, and I pull some stuff off the shelf, some old demo stuff that was nothing. Which, by the way, that shit sounded freaking, the stuff they rejected sounded twice as incredible as many things I hear now. And I would just sit there, and I would put the thing on, then I would just try to make it. I try to do everything I saw him do. And I did that. I did that for a while. And I basically never really asked him any questions about any of it, because the one thing I understood about him, he was, like I said, he gave you credit. And I was like, if you ask him questions, they better be good questions, because I don't want him to just go, "Oops, you're not that person." That was very important to me. And so I did. I started doing stuff, and the other part of my training, which wasn't training, a lot of people that were in the shop or that, ran the studio, they really weren't feeling me touching the stuff. They weren't feeling this kid just coming in and doing what he wants. So they started basically booby trapping the console. So like yesterday, when I would turn this knob and do that, it would work. And now today it's not working. So they were sabotaging me. What they were doing, they'd stick an open patch thing, so there'd be but I didn't know anything about anything. All I knew was like, yesterday worked, why doesn't it work now? So I started teaching myself to troubleshoot, because I needed to know, why isn't this working? I go, "Oh, what's that doing hanging there? Why is that out?" And, "Oh, this works." Oh, and I started, they basically were treating me to troubleshoot, and they had no idea. They just thought they were stopping me. Can't stop Jimmy D. This whole growth behind the console and being a part of the record company, understand they had power. And my whole thing was like, why can't I be on the top? And they're like, are you kidding me? Like, it doesn't happen that way. You have to work towards it. And I just kept teaching myself stuff to do, and I could do it, because that's the name of the game. Ahmed Jury would come back, "Can you do this or that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Tape editing, I taught myself how to do that, so that, I don't know, because what else you going to do? You got all this great stuff around you. You're going to learn how to use it. Otherwise, why are you there? And I think what happened was I wanted to be more involved and do more stuff and get more duties. And Jerry was like, "Dude, come on. I can't just, what are you talking about? You can't." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, because I was really good at directing bands and teaching them how to make their sound better and basically pull it together. I don't know where I got it from. I guess I'm that guy. I don't know. And people would just listen to me. The ideas seemed to be good, and they seemed to improve everything. So I guess without saying much about it, it was what it was. But also, I had entree to a studio, which was a big deal. Like when people came around. So a couple of bands I found one band on the street just playing. They came from Massachusetts and they came down in New York to find their fame and fortune. And they were just playing on the street. They're called St. Jock. I remember this. And it was an acoustic band. They sounded like Crosby, Stills, and Nash a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, they're great. And I was like, hey, I have a studio. Because I had keys to the studio, you know. I mean, I moved on a little bit and I had keys to the studio, but I was like, I have, you know, and they were like, oh, great. So I go to Jerry, I go, Jerry, I got the next whatever. You got to let me do this. He goes, no problem. You can use it. You can do the studio. I said, great. I said, who's going to engineer it? He goes, you want the studio? I said, yeah. He goes, you do it. I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I'm doing that now. So I did that, brought the band back. Jerry's like, this is terrible. He was like, this is terrible. I'm like, they sound like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. He goes, Jimmy, we have Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Like, that was also another lesson for me about record companies and their desires and what they need. It's like, we don't want something that sounds like something we have. We want something that's different. These are all lessons that I learned that made me, you know more. Anyway, and then I was another band, the same thing. Somehow they found me. I don't know where they came from, the Midwest. They found me. And I did the same thing. I did another one of those things, and I passed it in. I was like, he goes, these songs are terrible. They're da-da-da-da. And I was like, you know, he goes, but Jimmy, you know, this stuff is sounding really good. You're doing this. I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh man, it sounds, let me talk to Tommy and see what's going on. And next thing you know, I'm like thinking, well, you know, I couldn't be the guy I wanted to be, but if this allows me to be in the place, I'm good with it. One of the favorite parts for me for this particular job is the freedom to kind of work how I want to work and be free to express myself and constantly be able to contribute and to grow. And the other part is actually communicating with people and enjoying people and also working with you know, talent and sharing. You know, I always, one of the things, I've made a lot of records with a lot of people, a lot of different genres, you know, I'm very proud of that too. It's just, I don't really know what genre I really live in. I live in the genre of like, let's create. But one of the things I always say to people when they work with me, especially if we do an album or something, they go, you will never, ever make a record the same way you did before after working with me. It's impossible because the ideas have now melted together. You know, you don't have to use them all, but there's something that had to stick. I know that there's no way you can make the same record you may walk in this door. That's how I feel. And that's when I feel I'm successful. Doesn't have to sell, but selling is nice. The least favorite part of this job is actually the people that actually are responsible for making the difference in selling or not. Those people and their vision of how it works, it kind of goes against everything that I stand for. It's against the whole freedom thing. It's all very rigid. They have deadlines that have nothing to do with actually the creation of the music or the success of the creation of the music. It's like, it's got to be out this day, but what if it doesn't sound like anything? Doesn't matter. It's got to be out by this day. And that's like, I get it. And I get it without you folks. Well, that's not true. See, that's changing as well now. Due to the internet and all the different outlets and stuff, that's changing a lot. But still, I'm talking about the massive records. They still control the voice ways. They do. It's like, you know, they get, they make it happen. And that's where your, you know, millions of dollars come from. And we all want millions of dollars. Of course we do. Or we can just make music and then just enjoy it. The age-old question, why does a record become successful and why doesn't it? No one really knows. And you can listen to them talk about it. You can listen to why they think why. No one really knows. If we knew that, it's kind of like the stock market. You just put all your money on it and you would just walk in the door and it happens. It seems like we know. Record companies think they know when they're promoting product. They think they got it down. They've promoted much product that didn't happen. And I've been there on the other side of it. Wait till this record comes out. It's going to be the biggest record ever. Months later, crickets. Nobody talks about it. And then there's records that they didn't really want to hear about that suddenly blow up. And suddenly it's there. Now, you know, of course, there's all kinds of little checks and balances that everybody does. And there's things that you can do to make sure that you're guaranteed of your success. But for me, from everything I've ever learned, no one knows. I've sometimes mixed records, and I think one of the advantages of having hit records is it gives you a certain confidence and an understanding of what it's like to have your work out there in the world. And once you have that, if you're doing it on a kind of a half consistent level, it gives you a confidence in your putting it together, whether it's producing it, mixing it, whatever. It gives you a confidence that people are going to get to hear your work. And that's very important for how you create your work because you're always double checking yourself and you're always making sure there's a level of excellence there that really needs to be there. And also you're also learning how to get to that level of excellence quicker without double thinking yourself. Double thinking is the killer for all creators. You never double think yourself. That initial concept is what's coming out. There's your creativity. Follow it through, get it done, start it again if you want to. But in the middle of the stream, very, very rarely do I change course. I will if that's what I'm doing, but I won't go home tonight and go, oh, you should have left it the other way. I don't do that. A move is a move. So I'll give you a good example of a record in my life that taught me all about this, and it's a very important record. There's a group called Hall & Oates, and I was blessed and lucky enough to be a part of their first record, Abandoned Luncheonette, which was done with Arif Mardin, Gene Paul, who is Les Paul's son. He was also an engineer at Atlantic that worked with me, and we shared the duties together. And here's this fresh group from Philadelphia being managed by a guy named Tommy Mottola, who's basically nobody at this point. Everybody's nobody except, Arif is there. We're all doing something. And I got to say, that record was the most amazing record I'd ever made in my life at that point. That's all I can say. It was simply that. They had a Mellotron. They had an ARP 2600, and all these things were brand new. And it was all just, wow. And then, of course, there's Daryl Hall with his voice, and, John, and then they're in the bands, and Bernard Purdy's playing drums on it. It was just amazing. So, and like I say, Tommy Mottola is a new person. And we do this record, and we end up with this record called She's Gone. And we put that, Atlantic Records put that record out. Brick. Nothing. What are you talking about? That's the greatest record I've ever made in my life. You can't tell me that record didn't happen. But it didn't happen. And astutely, somehow Tommy Mottola was able to talk back his contract from Atlantic. Don't ask me how. I don't know why. That's why he's Tommy Mottola, I guess. And he took the group over to RCA. And their first record they made was called Sarah Smiles. Pew! We're talking through the roof. Now they're on the scene. Now they're Hall & Oates. Atlantic says, hey, what about that record we put out before? Let's re-release it. Let's resurface it. Didn't go in like today. We're like, well, you got to get da-da-da, go remix it and do it. No, same freaking record, untouched. They put it out. Pew! And I said, nothing's different about that record when we put it out the first time. What the hell happened? Okay. And that's the answer as to why people can't tell what a hit record is. There's so many other factors around it that control that, When you make a record after working with, well, superstars or whatever, you make with other people, I personally bring a lot of the energy that I got off of working with the superstar because, like I said, when you work with people, we pass this stuff and we rub together and we experience together. And I learned feelings from them. I learned creativity. So now I feel like I'm bringing to the unknown person some of this experience and knowledge that I was able to gain. And it gives me confidence in the product they're making to say, oh, we're going to step up. So art and commerce in music, I'll put it, that part of it, is really interesting because the creation of music gives you feeling. It's personal, and it actually can make you feel a certain way. It can change your feelings about life. You get the right music on the right day, and they actually change your emotions, and vice versa, You hear some, heavy metal doing whatever, and you're like, or you might be like, that's what I needed. Whatever it is that turns you on and makes you feel a certain way, music has that ability. But what comes with that is like the ability to make money from it. And sometimes you make records that, let's say, you don't really necessarily connect with emotionally necessarily, maybe even creatively, maybe sonically, maybe written wise or whatever, but yet maybe you're a part of it and it actually has success and it does make money and it does give you, when you're part of a product and people like it, they come after you because you had something to do with it. They're trying to get a piece of that magic on their record. But sometimes you made a record that really wasn't even in your wheelhouse, but you did it anyway. That's always been very interesting to me how those two things intersect because we do need money to live and all the above. But you know what? If we didn't, I would just do music because I just enjoy it. And I think actually, in that same statement, I think if there was no money involved, it would keep a lot of people out of it that really don't belong there because that's all they came for was, the fame of the money as opposed to, the fame of the creativity because a lot of them don't have it. They're very creative economically, but making music today is, I think, still an economically viable and sound business in terms of a business. But I always say over and over, understand it's called the music business. And I think business, from when I started, there was a lot of just like, this is fun, this is cool. And I guess a lot of people didn't get the money they should have gotten, or, it got the people on top took more than they should. So now everybody's really, really hyper focused on the money. And there's ways to make this money. People are making money in all kinds of ways, and you don't even know who they are. And they're quite happy. When they go to the supermarket and they got their little house or whatever they're doing, they're like, I'm cool. I don't need the fame. And the internet has changed everything that we do, and it's allowed a lot of people to be heard, many that should be, and many I wish weren't heard. But that's just the nature of the beast. So the world is wider. There's more opportunity for all of us. I always say this, and I always used to say this, and I will still say this even more than ever before. You can be successful in this business. Just don't, well, how do I say this? Some people are very clear about what they want and about how to go about getting it. But a lot of people, I say, don't tell the universe, don't dictate to the universe the package it's got to come in. You'll get your package. Keep working for the love of your craft. Because if you do that, the doorbell will ring in all kinds of ways you didn't expect. But if you tell them, like, listen, I need to be on this label being that person, it probably is not going to happen because there's too many conditions to make that happen. The one thing I think I would definitely tell my younger self about the business advice is like, pay a little more attention to the business. Don't be afraid to demand more. It's okay if it doesn't work out because you stand for what you stand for. Um, that would pretty much be the advice. I don't really pay a lot of attention to business. I somehow have this Zen thing about it, like it's all going to fall together, which is really totally naive and ridiculous to think that because it doesn't, you know, I'm taken care of to a certain extent, but it's like circumstances came and circumstances go. And yeah, I'm a terrible businessman. If I go back and talk to myself in the younger days, it really wouldn't be musical that I would be telling myself, or even craft wise. I did the best I could do with what I had. And I mean, it would be other things about life that I would tell myself about the human being, like how important being that part is even more important than actually learning the other stuff. Anybody can learn the craft. And not saying that I'm not good at it, I'm not saying not judging that. I'm just saying, but some of the things that I did as a person, I could have done better. That could have actually changed some things for the moment or made me feel better about myself. To the people that are out there, I guess, who are struggling, who are actually halfway there, and those who are even there. From my experience, from my whole life experience, and what I've kind of been through, which is many, 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 many situations. The one thing I could look at and say, if I wanted to suggest, is if anybody's asking, because everybody knows what they're doing, right? No, but the one thing that I would suggest is that basically stick to who you are. The information that you get, the one thing that I see a lot is people think that if I see the magician's trick, then that's going to be just enough for me to get over and make it work for me. The magician's trick is basically only just so you get a sense of how a trick can work. You need to go make your own trick. Making my trick doesn't do anything for you because it's just my trick, which I found by myself, stumbling. And I feel that that's one of the things that there could be a little more of. I'd also say that I hear a lot of confidence out there, but I also hear a lot of people that don't have confidence in what they do. And I think that having confidence in what you do is basically everything. Because if you know who you are and you know what you're doing, well, people can suggest to you, big people, small people, all kinds of people, you have a path that you've carved for yourself that is important for you, makes you feel good about yourself, and you also have a feeling, hopefully, that it's going to carry you through. And the other thing I'd say is, like, instead of always talking about what you're doing, learn to listen more to people around. And when I say listen to more, I mean, like, even listen to, like, great, there's a big important people. They have a lot to say and it's very qualified. But every now and then, it's the little guy. I'll tell you an example. Like when I do mixes and stuff, all the big people in the room, they tell me stuff and I go, oh, you know too much. And you're giving me these answers or these things that are like, you just know too much about it. And there'll be somebody sitting on the couch, or somebody that doesn't know anything. They go, I like it, but why does she sound screechy in this little part? And I go, holy moly. They didn't walk in and say, it needs more 7K. They didn't do that. It was just a regular person that gave me their true impression of what they heard. And I go, that needs to be addressed because they knew nothing, but they knew what they felt. So those are the kind of things I would suggest to people. Just be more aware, be open, and enjoy the journey.